From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Thank you very much, Ollie Barrett. Welcome to Tuesday's Richie Allen Show. How are you? Hope you've had a good day. Been a bit mixed here in the great city of Manchester. My name is Richie Allen. Right now, you can tweet this programme live. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. Love to hear your thoughts on the stories being discussed today.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show. It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Now I'm excited this hour to meet Tim Black, whom I've been connected with on social media for some time. Really interesting guy, Tim. Excellent broadcaster, great speaker, and he's got a terrific show. It's the Tim Black at Night show, and he talks about a lot of things, salient things that you and I would be interested in. So I've invited Tim on. We're going to have a chat in general about one or two of the biggest stories of the week in the US, but we'll also talk about the media as well and journalism. Tim Black joins the show this hour. And coming up in the second hour, I welcome back to the show Mickey Summers. Now, Mickey's not been on with me for over 2 years. Mickey is a child abuse survivor. He was abused at a children's care home in Nottingham. He's an activist these days. He represents a large group of people who want justice and who want those responsible for covering up child abuse in Nottingham to be brought to justice. Now, the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse is actually in Nottingham for the next couple of weeks. Mickey's been there today and yesterday. He'll come on in the second hour and he'll let us know what's been going on with him. That's very important stuff. Mickey Summers in the second hour, Tim Black in the first hour on Tuesday's Richie Allen Show, October 2nd, 2018. You're very welcome to it. Thanks for joining me. Yeah, I time that every day. Yes. No, of course I don't. Well, you all right, you well. Miserable old day today. Had an experience this morning in the park, in Alexandra Park. I might tell you about it later on. It speaks to the madness in society and how people are angry, how everybody is angry, how everybody has got rage welling up within them. Most of them don't know why, but they do. Had an interesting experience. If I find time at the end of the programme, I'll get into it with you. We might talk Generation Snowflake and student unions. I did a little video on this today. I'm not sure if we'll have time for that, but we might talk about that as well. But the Conservative Party conference goes on in Birmingham, and Boris Johnson, the former Foreign Secretary, spoke at a fringe event today, and the international media covered it. They were all there. What would he say about the Chequers plan? What would he say about Theresa May? Would there be blood on the carpets? What sort of reception would he get? All of that nonsensical guff. But he was there and he spoke. And I'm going to bring you a little bit of what he had to say. And you might be surprised at what I think of it. But I'll be honest anyway. Not that it matters what I think about it, but I'll give you one or two opinions. So Johnson then renewed his attack on this Chequers plan, calling it a cheat that could lead to a boost for the far right. Now, he went on about other things as well, tax cuts and an increase in house building. There were pretty long queues, it must be said, outside this event before Johnson went to speak. Even an hour beforehand, there was big queues around the corner. They all wanted to see the bumbling Boris. Here is some of what he had to say this afternoon. Boris Johnson.
If I have a function here today, it is to try, with all humility, to put some lead into the collective pencil, to stop what seems to me to be a ridiculous seeping away of our self-belief, and to invite you to feel a realistic and justified confidence in what we can do. What the Chequers proposals show is that the United Kingdom, for all its power and might and network of influences around the world, for all its venerable parliamentary history, was unable ultimately to take back control. And instead of reasserting our ability to make our laws, the UK will be effectively paraded in manacles down the Rue de la Loi like karatekas. This is the moment to chuck checkers.
Yeah, chuck checkers. To whoops and cries and screams from the assembled delegates there. Now, Johnson then reminded the delegates that the European Union has a long history of undemocratic behaviour and failing to recognise the will of the people, referenda and other votes. Here's Johnson on EU tactics.
So I've been watching the EU professionally for 30 years, and every time a referendum goes against the federalist cause, I have seen how the centripetal forces lock on, and slowly the offending country is winched back into place. And by its manifest democratic injustice, Chequers provides the perfect logic and argument for those who want Britain to return to the EU, and is therefore a recipe for continued acrimony. If Chequers is agreed, I'm afraid it will only embolden those who are now calling for a second referendum. And these are the same people, incidentally, who explicitly, some of them distinguished former prime ministers and so on, who explicitly, I remember it, you all remember it, explicitly told the electorate in 2016 that if they voted Leave, there was no going back. Remember that? No second chances. That was it. We're leaving the customs union and the single market. They now say that no such thing was on the agenda, but that was what they said then. And they said that the people had to get it right in 2016 because they would never be asked again. And they are now cynically campaigning to do just that in a way that I think would be disastrous for trust in politics.
Yes, remember Ireland, remember Denmark, remember France when they tried to escape the clutches of the European Union. So when I talk about the European Union, and I sometimes play audio clips of Johnson and sometimes of people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, it seems to be a tad confusing for people, and they take it upon themselves to believe that I'm somehow a Conservative Party fan, or that I'm a fan of people like Boris Johnson. I'm not. Boris Johnson is a gangster, as are most of his colleagues, slipped into Westminster to skim the joint dry. He's a front man. And the gangsters who control Johnson, right, want more of the pie that the European Union has taken for 40 years, but not to give it back to the righteous people. No, of course not. Johnson is an unashamed conservative free market capitalist. Right? The people Johnson is working for are no better than the people that the Blairites and the Liberal Democratites, to kind of phrase, are working for. They're the same gangsters. They're basically looking to look after themselves and their cronies. That's a fact. And I've never shied away from that. And ultimately, to keep using the Martin Scorsese casino analogies, the eye in the sky is in control of it all. And it, whatever it is, whatever you think it is, doesn't want the UK to leave the European Union anyway. So even if Johnson were to get his way, it's not going to be good for people. Don't think for a minute that everything is going to change if the United Kingdom left the European Union. It would be the greatest thing in the world if it did, but it doesn't necessarily mean that things are going to go back to, well, the way they never were. It doesn't mean that things are going to become all rainbows and fluffy kittens overnight. Doesn't work like that. They work for gangsters. They are gangsters. It's important to remember that. I'm not endorsing Boris Johnson as a character or as a politician or any politician anywhere in the world. Just listen to the news today at the top of the hour. The European Union is threatening Italy again over its budget. And of course the Italians, they believe in Liga and 5-star. These guys, it's all bullshit. Donald Trump, all of it, every bit of it. These guys that say they're anti-globalism, they're standing up for the little guy, taking control back. They're all liars. Liars. Watch how the Liga and 5-star movement in Italy folds just as Syriza did in Greece. Empty rhetoric. Lies. And the poor people without jobs struggling to get from one week to the next. Believe them, they see them, they reach out, and people are doing the same with Johnson. Yes, the European Union is a tyrannical, undemocratic dictatorship. It's a federalist project, which is one huge piece of a jigsaw towards a one world government. No doubt about it. It has to be dismantled. But though Johnson and others say all the right things, are they going to deliver you from evil, really, if you put your lives in their hands after Brexit? No, of course not. Let's hear Jacob Rees-Mogg then, because he was on Sky News with Kay Burley, future Pulitzer Prize recipient, no doubt, Kay Burley. And she put it to Rees-Mogg that crashing out will be catastrophic for us all.
Are we in a position where we may find ourselves, as I said, crashing out? Now, you won't accept that phraseology, so let me put it in a slightly different way. Come the 29th of March next year, if we find that the 27 are not going to accept the Chequers deal, and the Prime Minister says that we are not going to do anything else but Chequers, we're at an impasse, are we not? To use a French word.
That's a very good French word. I'm glad you're not trying to conduct the interview in French, because I think you'd be much better at it than I would be. We would then leave on a tried and tested system in the way we trade with the rest of the world. Our biggest individual national trading partner is the United States of America, with whom we trade on WTO terms. It's a really good way of trading with people. It's adopted across the world. We can do that with the EU. Fear not, is the message I would give.
But I wanted to bring you back to that point, Mr. Rees-Mogg. By even the own government's calculations, our GDP would be down something like 8% as a result of leaving without a deal.
But you're not reminding people of how catastrophically bad and inaccurate the government's predictions have been so far. The Treasury's...
So it could be worse.
The Treasury's predictions have been humiliatingly bad. They said that we might have an increase of unemployment of 800,000 purely on voting to leave the European Union. They promised a punishment budget and they said the economy would shrink. The economy has grown. Unemployment is at the lowest level since modern records began.
Yeah, because you've got shed loads of, well, more than shed loads of 0 hours contracts and very, very low paying jobs. And those are counted in the statistics. That's nonsense. Now, I don't mind Rees-Mogg. I'm not endorsing him, mind. I don't mind him. Rees-Mogg gives me the impression that if he could make it so, you know, he'd be happy to make the lives of people around him and the lives of maybe less off people maybe a bit better. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm naive. I'm not endorsing him. But it's nonsense to suggest that everything is on the up and up. It isn't. But that doesn't mean that leaving the European Union is responsible for things being the way they are.
Began, employment has gone up to the highest level since records began, in spite of the Project Fear run by the Treasury. So I'm afraid they're so discredited as forecasters that you'd be better off reading your horoscope.
Yes, agreed, absolutely agreed that the doomsayers and the doommongers and those who said that we would be absolutely destroyed if and when we left were liars and their projections were laughable. But don't go on television saying that employment is at a record high. It isn't. Homelessness is at a record high, Jacob. Just take a walk down Market Street in Manchester. Head over to the Northern Quarter, right? Head down Trinity Way and head for Castlefield and see dozens and dozens and dozens of able-bodied young men and women. Not all of them with addiction issues. In fact, as far as I can tell, the vast majority don't have addiction issues. They're just absolutely broke. Some of them actually have jobs, working 20 hours a week, but they've nowhere to live. Amazingly. And they're being paid under the table by various people to do various jobs. So that's the way it is. Don't say that it's all on the up and up, and that it will continue to be on the up and up if we leave the European Union. Again, leaving the European Union must, for humanity, stop the march towards a one world government and a federal planet that they want, where everything is controlled by a handful of people. Yes, but be careful of, when you come out, who you hand it over to. People like Boris Johnson and others. Shall we leave that alone? I was going to play some James Cleverly, who's the Conservative Party Deputy Chairman. He was talking about delaying Article 50. Well, when I say that, the media today was putting that question to everybody. It seems like the mainstream media in this country today wanted to push and push and push the idea of delaying Article 50. because May has no chance of getting Parliament to support this disastrous Chequers plan. None. It's going to be voted down in Parliament. That's a fact. It's not conjecture. No chance of voting it down. And the European Union have said they wouldn't accept it anyway. So while all this chaos is going on, the media, the so-called unbalanced, it is unbalanced, unbiased media is asking the question over and over and over again, well, why don't we just delay it? Why don't we delay it a bit? Let's delay it for a year. Let's delay leaving for a year so it gives us all more time to see where we want to be. But of course the mainstream media is unanimous in its support for the UK staying in the European Union. 18 minutes past the hour, Tuesday's show. I mentioned this on a video I did this afternoon, a stream that I did. Clapping has been banned at the University of Manchester Students' Union. So the Students' Union have basically said that clapping triggers anxiety in people, and by banning it, it might improve even accessibility for students attending events. Now, I looked into this and I invited the Students' Union to come on the programme today. I knew I'd get no response. And there's a woman working for the Students' Union called Sarah Khan, and she was heavily involved in defacing the Rudyard Kipling mural at Manchester University. And I tweeted her as well. I didn't get much change. Basically, they want people to do the jazz hands clapping to express your support when you're at an event. And they said that the loud noise of clapping and whooping, it does pose an issue to students with anxiety or sensory issues. British Sign Language clapping or jazz hands would be a more inclusive form of expression. Now, of course, dear listener, no deaf person or no person with anxiety has approached the Students' Union to say, well, I'd love to attend these speaking events, but to be honest with you, clapping scares the living shit out of me. So would you perchance consider changing the way you express your approval at some of these events? No deaf person, no anxiety-ridden person has approached these fucking snowflakes. And somebody made a very good point on Twitter today. It might have been William there on Twitter, saying that taken in isolation, this just looks laughable. It's just something of nothing. But it isn't something of nothing, and it isn't laughable. These lunatics are enacting this sort of thing without any opposition to it whatsoever. These are the same people who want safe spaces on campus. These are the same people, I swear to Jesus, who are saying things like criminology students should be allowed to exempt themselves from lectures where crime scene photos might be fucking shown. Can you believe that? What use are you fucking snowflake, when you've got to go to the scene of a crime then? Right? And what does the university do? Yeah, it's a good idea, that, yeah. Thank you, Shane. Great idea. Let's exempt them. Theologians or would-be theologians, you don't have to discuss the crucifixion of Christ. Or look at images rendered by artists centuries ago of the soldiers thrusting the spear into Jesus' side. No, you don't have to look at that. No, because you might be triggered. They are homogenizing and sanitizing. It's a perverse fucking Howard Hughes times a million. Sanitize your entire environment. Put every human being into a cocoon. Make them an island unto themselves. Isolate themselves from everybody and everything. And promise them that. It's okay. You can go through life like that. It is madness. And it is infuriating. And the anger is genuine. I'm not putting it on. It absolutely drives me mad. I want to punch some of these people. And I reject violence. I have no time for it. And I don't mean the Sarah Khan, the fucking snowflake woman, but some of these blokes that are behind this. You want to grab them, you know? So what's wrong with you? Cretins, all of them. And yet this is going unopposed right across the campuses of the United Kingdom. Let me calm down. Calm down, dear, calm down. Let's get Tim Black on. Tim is going to be live from DC. Looks like a lovely guy, Tim. Very smart, very articulate. Puts together some terrific programs. And he's always got something interesting to say on Twitter as well. So we'll meet Tim. We'll have a chat. Don't forget, coming up in the second hour, Mickey Summers returns to this programme. Very interesting man. He's got a lot of things to say. He's been attending the hearings in Nottingham. The independent inquiry into child sex abuse is in Nottingham for the next couple of weeks, and we will be hearing from Mickey in the second hour. Back after this.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today.
Please do. David tweets, all this snowflakia is to breed a weak generation, easily controlled, undoubtedly. David William tweets, my daughter Lola is autistic, Richie, and she kicks off at clapping, but we wouldn't want to ban clapping because of that fact. It can be a bit awkward at times, but we work around it one way or another. That's exactly what you do, I would imagine. Yeah. No doubt about it, William, thank you. I had a tweet from Nadia today who said as much, that she gets a bit anxious in crowds when there's a lot of noise. And I'm sure that's not so uncommon, you know. And I wouldn't laugh at anybody who gets a bit anxious, you know. I'm somebody who... I'm not fond of loud bangs either. I mean, we're getting into Halloween season now, and we're in... South Manchester, big student population, and every year for weeks it just goes crazy and it is loud, and if you're out and about it's very startling, and I don't like it either, but I can't ban it just because I don't like it, you know. Anyway, let's introduce our guest this hour then. I'm really looking forward to speaking with him. By the way, if you've got something to say to me or to him, do tweet at Richie Allen Show. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. Now, he is a host, speaker, journalist and activist, and I've been following his Tim Black at Night show, and it is very, very interesting, terrifically well put together. He's No Sellouts stream live every Monday to Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and he speaks to an array of very interesting people, politicians, activists and famous people. I'm going to recommend that you follow him on Twitter as well. His Twitter handle is simply at Real Tim Black. That's at Real Tim Black. Right now, he's not quite there, so I'll tell you what I'll do. Just as I was about to say hello to him, I think I might have lost the connection. Let me try that again. Let's see. I'll try it again and again and again and again, as they say, and we'll see can we get him on the line. But very interesting man, got a lot of interesting things to say. At Real Tim Black is his Twitter handle. I'm calling him now, but he's not picking up, and I know he's there. A lot of trouble with the old Skype lately, huh? A little bit of trouble with the old Skype lately. I'll tell you what we'll do then. We'll be clever and we'll sort it out off air. That's the professional thing to do. Music from Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, Nowhere to Run on your Richie Allen Show, 27.5 minutes past the hour. And I believe Tim is there now. Tim, welcome to our show. How are you?
Hey, Richie, I'm fine. How you doing, my friend?
I'm delighted to have you on. Thanks for coming on. I gave you a lovely build-up there, and then we didn't connect, but thanks, Tim. Good to have you on, my friend. Live from DC, and there's loads I want to talk about between now and the top of the hour. Couple of things that, first of all, folks, Tim can be found, again, let me mention again, at Real Tim Black on Twitter. There's only one Tim Black. If you go to YouTube and put Tim Black in, you'll find Tim's channel and links there to all his videos and all of his programs as well. Very interesting program, always interesting. Tim, you're a rare breed because you're not at all opposed to speaking with people who might have diametrically different opinions to you. Why is that becoming so rare, Tim? And isn't it a dangerous thing that we run away from the people who have different opinions than us, who see the world a bit differently? It's not good for democracy. It's not good for journalism.
I agree with you, Richie. I think that it's always been this way. There's always been the partisanship here in the States, but I think it's been ramped up and amplified due to the Donald Trump presidency. I think the fact that he is just so different an animal from the other presidents, even Republican presidents before him, Bush, Reagan. He's just so different. He's so counterculture that it just creates this more separation. So they villainize anyone who will have any type of dialogue with anyone on the right. They want to definitely keep those two separate. So there's a lot of stigma behind having conversations with people with different political beliefs, just because of the division and because of the political climate being so hot right now.
You know, I grew up as in a family of trade unionists, and I suppose if I was to identify as anything, I would have identified as a socialist. And when I used to vote, I would have always voted on the left. I'll tell you what I've noticed, Tim, and some of my guests have noticed this. Years ago, when I was coming up when I mean coming up in journalism in the 1990s, the left was a place for free expression and free ideas. It was left-wing commentators who were champions of free speech and would demand that people whom they fundamentally disagreed with were still given a platform. And back then it seemed to be the right that was anti-free speech and wanted to close down ideas they didn't agree with. I think it might have gone 180 degrees. And I think what we might be seeing now is we might be seeing various commentators on the right who are seemingly happy to talk to anybody. But now today's left, which I think is a different type of left than the one I remember, it's in the left that you find those who want to censor people and who want to shut down opinions. Now, I could be wrong. What do you think?
I think you may have a point there as far as they use these tactics, man, where they use either race or gender, to kind of stifle any type of conversation. Like, I don't know if this is new because, frankly, I've only been involved in politics maybe 6-7 years now. Up until then, I had an aversion to it. A gag reflex, Richie, is what I would call it. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I don't know. We like to refer to them as neoliberals, people who and establishment people who just pander to the establishment as sort of being these people that want to control the conversation. And yeah, it's tough out here. It really is.
Tim Black is our guest. Tim has been talking a lot, and I'm very fascinated by this. Tim, you've only been covering politics. 7 years is long enough. And one of the things that you've concluded, and you write very eloquently about this, is that it doesn't really matter. Left versus right is an illusion, really. You talk a lot about the money in politics, and right now it doesn't matter, Tim. Talk to us about that. I mean, I used to talk for years with people about, getting money and getting special interests out of politics. This is something you were very interested in.
Oh, Richie, man, if we don't change the fact that we have Citizens United, which allows corporations and billionaires and multimillionaires to funnel money into candidates controlling our legislation. Hell, we have think tanks that are writing legislation for congressmen and passing it off as if it was their ideas from their constituents. This is constantly happening here in the States. So until we have a change of who runs our democracy, we won't have a democracy. What we actually have is an oligarchy. And those people who think that there's a big difference between Republicans and Democrats, not on the establishment level, I mean, they all have the same masters.
Yeah.
Different receipts is what I would say. Like everyone's collecting checks, and maybe they got a different receipt, but they're coming basically from the same people, from the same organizations, the same money interests. So I tell people all the time, if you're on either side of this, looking and saying, there goes the bad guys over there, you totally have missed the boat, because the bad guys are the bankers, they are Wall Street, they are big pharmaceuticals, insurance companies, and these are the puppet masters behind the puppeteers, the actual puppets that we see as our politicians.
That was brilliantly put, Tim. And why do you think it is? This is the $64 million question. why, this is the $64 million question. Why can't people seem to get their heads around that very simple fact that your politicians, your representatives are not, never have done, maybe the founding fathers, that's another argument, but are not working for your best interest. They're working for those who own them. Why can't they get through? Why can't that fact get through, Tim? Why?
That's because Richie, they sell this identity politics so well, brother. They use social issues like, did this woman this man who used to be a woman who had a surgery just use the girl's bathroom? Like, they use these issues of race, of are we kneeling for the flag? Are we standing for the flag? These issues are so emotionally connected to people that we forget what's going on. Meanwhile, the legislation's going on behind your back, and that stuff is going through and it's taking away your rights. So they use emotional triggers, Richie, to distract us all from what's really going on.
And we all fall for it, Tim. And we all fall for it. One of the things Tim, our listeners will know, because I've been talking about you for the last couple of days and you're on now. Our listeners will know that Tim is African American. You talk about race baiting and you talk about identity politics. I'm fascinated by some of these grassroots movements, Tim, that come out. Movements like the Me Too movement and, of course, movements like Black Lives Matter. Now, I'm not a virtue signaller and I'm not going to tell lies. I don't know too many black people, which is just the way it is. Not in this city. There are plenty of black men and women in Manchester. It's where I live, and I've not lived here all my life. I don't know too many black people. I know plenty of Asian people, but not too many black people. I look at this issue, and to me, certain truths should be self-evident. Again, to use that great phrase, that everybody is entitled to peace and prosperity and happiness, no matter who they are, no matter what they look like, no matter what God they worship. And nobody could argue with activists working with Black Lives Matter saying, black men are more likely to be shot by the police. They are. There's no doubt about that, 100%. Black people are more likely to be sentenced to death in places like Florida and Texas. Absolutely right. The stats are irrefutable. But I look at these groups, and I'm asking, this is not a loaded question, it's a serious question because I don't know the answer. I wonder about these groups like Black Lives Matter, Me Too. Are they genuine, Tim? Or did they start out genuine and did they become co-opted by people that want to divide us and want us killing one another instead of looking at the real enemy? Go ahead.
Smart. You're a smart man, Richie. I love it, brother. You're absolutely right. They start off as genuine, but anything that it is allowed to grow within the confines of political discourse or anything that's able to shape the consciousness or change people's attitudes about anything significant that impacts votes or money, well, it will be co-opted by the establishment and will be modified. They do this a number of ways. Sometimes, back in the days, like back in the 60s, they would just kill your leaders. They'd kill Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, JFK. You just shoot them. That's how you get rid of them. Medgar Evers. Now it's changed. Now what they do is they give you money. Like my wife worries about me all the time, Richie, and I tell her, hey, they don't just car bomb you in the United States. First they show up with a job and a check. That's what they do. So that's what they do with these movements. Sure, Black Lives Matter started as an actual opposition to police brutality in Ferguson, Missouri. The people who started that organization have no connection whatsoever to the Black Lives Matter entities that you see on the news. They brought in their own handpicked people. These are establishment DC think tanks, and with the backing of people like George Soros. They brought in their own people and placed them in front of the media. And the media said, hey, looks like Black Lives Matter. So this happens continuously. Yeah. It happened in Occupy Wall Street. It happened with Black Lives Matter. It's happening with the Me Too movement. The woman who started it, black woman, totally separated from what's going on in Hollywood. This was about regular women, average working women with regular jobs, being harassed on the job. And it's been totally taken away and turned into a totally different animal, Richie.
It's interesting. This is fascinating stuff, Tim. Tim Black is our guest, folks. Check out Tim on YouTube. Follow him on Twitter. It's @RealTimBlack. Brilliant to have you on, Tim. This is great stuff. It really is. Now, somebody said to me about 2 years ago. Now, it was a listener who sent an email, and his name, if I remember right, his name was Michael, and he was from Detroit, Michigan, and said he was African American, and he talked about just what you were talking about there, and he said, Wow, this is amazing, Tim. He said, I wish I had the email to hand. He said something along the lines of, our great African-American leaders going way back. You mentioned Malcolm X, of course, and Dr. King. Those guys were diametrically opposed. Well, Dr. Martin Luther King anyway, to separation and division. They were about human rights for everybody. They were about we're all in it together. Yes, black people don't have the right to vote in so many states. It's a disgrace. Yes, the police are beating black people up on the streets. It's a disgrace. But ultimately, this is coming to everybody if we don't stop it. And Michael, who emailed me from Michigan, Michigan said that what we're seeing now, not just in the Black Lives movement, but in the alt-right and all these other movements, are people specifically slipped in there because that's not their narrative. Their narrative is not, listen, we're all getting screwed here, we need to come together. Their narrative is, well, we're getting screwed and we're the only group that's getting screwed. Everybody's against us. It's like a race to the bottom. Do you go along with what Michael said? Do you think he had a point?
Well, I do agree that Michael is a smart man. He does see what ends up becoming of a movement. But I will say that Martin Luther King Jr. specifically and Malcolm X, they both understood how politics works. They may have started up, Martin Luther King, he started off saying, black people need certain rights. We need the right to vote. We need the right to earn a living. But he realized that he wasn't going to get any traction if he didn't include white folks, poor white folks. In fact, the last act that he was in the process of doing was a Poor People's March, which would totally change the entire spectrum of his audience. This was going to open it up to all folks who are getting screwed by the same people. Genius. You're absolutely right. That's what he was moving to, and as we know, that's part of the reason why he had his demise.
He was an absolute genius, wasn't he? I mean, what a man he would have been to meet. Dr. Martin Luther King. Tim Black is our guest. Loads of comments on this. People talking about... You said something on Twitter. It was a bit sad, to be honest. I'm going to read it out. I'm going to read your tweet out word for word. It's a horrible thing to grow up a black in America. You'll remember this tweet now. To admire successful black people who defied great odds only to find most of them sold out politically to the Democratic Party without getting shit for those not as fortunate as them. Soul-crushing agony. That's a deep tweet there, Tim. That you're basically saying that most successful or a lot of successful black people did really well, were on the verge of doing something, but then sold out politically. Why do you think that happens? And just before you answer that, that's not unique to any group of people, to any race or to any creed. I remember, Tim, when a factory my father worked in many years ago was on strike. There were 3,000 workers there, Tim. And you know how the owners of the company, how they broke people's spirits and how they broke the resistance of the workers. They basically started, and you mentioned this a few minutes ago, they basically started giving money, Tim, and management jobs to the more important leaders amongst the workforce. You know what happens everywhere. So going back to your tweet then, how does it happen that people on the verge, doing really well, have got a great voice, how do they end up selling out?
You just said it. You're absolutely right. And I don't want to suggest that this is something exclusive to the black folks who are, achieving things in the United States or anywhere in the world. It's just that we are so far behind in the United States. 40% of black children live underneath the poverty line. We are the most incarcerated. We are, we face so many obstacles financially. There was a report recently done that showed that a white high school dropout earns more than a black college graduate on average. Okay, so this is the reality of black life in the United States. So we are. How can I say? We deal with these things, and I know I'm putting a lot of pressure on black folks, but we have to start making some changes in the way that we vote, the way that we are politically active. If we don't do that, nothing's going to change. Hey, look, Richie, if I thought there was another route besides politics to change these problems, I would take it. Okay, but there is no way to it's too big of a problem. We have big problems, Richie. They can't be solved by me just being a charismatic speaker. They must be solved using the tools of politics. Let me put
just before I put an alternative option in front of you to see what you think about. And it's a Martin Luther King idea, and it's a Gandhi idea. So you know where I'm going. But before I go there, it sounds like. But before I go there, you said that 40% of blacks live below the poverty line in the country. I think that's a horrendous statistic. The statistics about violence against black folks as opposed to violence against whites, again, there's no disputing those statistics, and I campaigned for years against the death penalty, and some of the things I learned while campaigning against it sickened me to my stomach. You know, in Florida, 6 times more likely, if you're a black man, you commit murder in the same circumstances as a white man, you've got a 6 times more chance of getting the needle than the white guy who did it. How could that be right? What about, how do you deal? I've had some of the, what would you call them, white supremacists on over the years sometimes, arguing with them, and the alternative right, when they throw out this nonsense, well, if blacks are more likely to go to prison, that's because blacks are committing most of the crimes. Now, this is bullshit, Tim. I know this is bullshit, but that's what they'll throw out there, and they'll throw a whole pile of statistics at it. How does a guy like you cope with that? How do you respond to that?
You know what? I try to have empathy, and it's not because I'm like this super nice guy and I'm trying to get into heaven. I'm not a saint. It's just that I realize that every day, like, they're watching something, man. Like, they're consuming some type of media that gave them that idea. It's a bogus idea. We both agree, Richie, that it's askew, that it's not factual. But someone's telling them this crap, and they're believing it, right? So I always try to keep that in mind. I mean, we can have that conversation about what came first, the chicken or the egg. We want. Anywhere in the world that you go, if you have poverty, you have crime. Absolutely right. Tim Black is our guest. Of course, Tim, you know, we see it in London. Somebody came on one of my programmes a year or so ago and, was about to come on and sent me a message over Skype saying that, you know, it's no coincidence that in inner city London that it's blacks stabbing people. And like, well, it's also no coincidence that if you're living in inner city London, if you're poor and you're living in a high rise, you know, that you will find a lot of ethnic minority folks there, not just black folks, but Asians and other ethnic minorities. It's a stupid point to make. I've looked at this for years. I've read every book ever written on the subject. Black people, nor white people, nor Chinese people are more likely to commit crimes than anybody else. They're not. Circumstances dictate cases. There's no doubt about that. Point I was going to make, Tim, was civil disobedience. Now, I've rejected politics. I just rejected it because they're all playing for the same people. You're right. Get all the dirt, get money out of it, full stop, let alone dirty money. Get money out of it, change it 100%, go in a 180 degree turn. I'd agree with all that, but I don't see it happening. I've seen success in other countries, historically, non-violent civil disobedience, Tim. If we got up blacks, whites, Hispanics, Latinos, whatever whomever you are, and say, you know what, tomorrow we're not complying with the system anymore. What do you think? I think it would get publicity, but there goes the other pillar to that would be media coverage. Yeah. You know, if that's why what you do, Richie, here is so important. Is, you know, same thing I feel for independent media here in the United States. I mean, if there's no way to amplify it, for example, a couple years ago, there was these riots in Baltimore, Maryland. They called it the Baltimore Uprising. The horrible thing, buildings, businesses, center plunder. This was all due to a shooting that occurred about a month earlier of a young man by the name of Freddie Gray. You may remember this story. Well, there was civil disobedience for about a week, but no one would cover it, Richie. No one would talk about it because it wasn't news until someone broke a window. And then it got round-the-clock coverage. So without media being there to capture these stories, to amplify it, things can happen. Like, does a tree really fall in the forest if no one's there to hear it? It's that type of thing. So I agree with you. Civil disobedience works, but they also have to have a comprehensive media coverage that will amplify the message to get the word out. So, Tim, basically, and I suspected this anyway, when you had these murders, we saw Trayvon Martin, of course, in Florida. When we have these murders, decent folks like you and me, because we're totally opposed to violence, they come out and they say, right, enough is enough. What I think happens then, and I can't prove it, is they're infiltrated. So a few good men are hired, a few scumbags, Tim,
right, go into town there and start smashing up windows and smashing up cars. And then the media can say, look at the blacks, look, they're all crazy, look. And of course, white America goes, look at the blacks, look, they're crazy, they're burning their own cars. And I never met an African, I met plenty of African Americans when I travelled in America years ago. I don't meet anybody. I don't know anybody who behaves like that. People just don't behave like that. Not blacks, not Chinese, not anybody. So I suspect, Tim, a few good men are given a few, they tool them up, go in there now and cause a bit of trouble. I think when you've got the anti-globalist protests outside the big banks, you often see violence and you think, where's that coming from? Are these planted people, Tim?
You know, in some instances, I think that you're correct, but I also believe that some people are so devoid of hope and an opportunity, and they feel like this is an opportunity for me to get some free stuff. This is an opportunity for me to I saw someone stealing toilet tissue. During the Baltimore uprising, there was a famous picture of a man stealing toilet paper, Richie.
Jesus.
So this is the situation. I mean, unemployment in some of these inner cities are close to 50% for African Americans. So given that the financial dire straits that these people are in, I cannot say with certainty that they wouldn't be involved if given that opportunity to somehow change their financial position, even if momentarily, even though it doesn't make much sense. It's what happens.
Yeah, it's an honest answer. I mean, you talk about that sort of poverty. Tim, I was horrified recently to learn, and I know you keep an eye on the British media, so you might have seen the story, that a huge percentage of young women in this country, some of them in school, many of them in the workforce, because things are so difficult, can't afford sanitary products. I couldn't believe it. That level of poverty. Now, I know things are very bad. I'm well aware of it. I'm not naive. But when you think that level of poverty exists, I suppose I can understand that if everything kicks off and you've got a big protest, and if it gets a bit violent, I suppose I could understand why somebody would take something from a shop, even if I wouldn't condone it. It's an honest answer. I still do believe there's infiltration, though, Tim. There's got to be. Why allow a bunch of intelligent people come together and say, we've had enough of being ignored, we've had enough of getting crapped on from above, and we're going to come out and do something about it, and we're going to join together. Why wouldn't you infiltrate that and put some idiots in there?
Absolutely. I believe you're right. I think I think both things can happen in different situations, in different locations. It's how it works. I mean, they did that in the 60s and the 70s. It's widely known that they used COINTELPRO here by the FBI in order to infiltrate movements and squash any type of uprising. So yes.
We're going to finish on a tiny argument, you and I. It's great. We got to have an argument. There's too much of a love in here, Tim. We can't have it. We're going to have an argument. We're going to have a bit of an argument. My listeners love it because we can argue like gentlemen. White privilege, Tim. Now, in light of everything that we've said and I've agreed with, I'm going to sound like a moron when I say that I don't think that white privilege exists. And that I also don't think that because I'm a white guy and I had I was brought up, I had a white upbringing, that I couldn't possibly understand the struggles of black men and black women. That kind of identity politics kind of annoys me, and it's kind of divisive. White privilege, Tim, give us the lowdown on white privilege. What is it?
Well, white privilege, first of all, is a horrible term.
Right,
that's
it is.
part of the problem, right? We need a better term, a better way to define this thing we want to describe. Here's the thing. It does not mean that you as a white guy had it easy. It doesn't mean that you've had a silver spoon in your mouth and you never had to work for anything and life was so easy and you just, skipped your way into, a luxury living and everything was handed to you. That's not what it means. What it means is you may have had it bad, but you did not have it bad because you were a white guy. That's what it means. That's all it means. I don't know what's the better term to use.
I can't argue with that, Tim. I can't argue with it because I was never stopped and frisked by a couple of stupid police officers. It never happened to me. But when I lived and worked in London, I worked with several black men and women who worked at a TV channel I worked at. And they were all educated to the same standard as me. They were like us. They were articulate. And they said, Richie, do you have any idea how embarrassing it is? When you're in London, you could be in Soho, you could be up Leicester Square, Richie, and some policeman comes over and asks you, what are you doing? and you're well dressed. And I have to admit, no, I don't know what that's like, no. And they're like, well, that's what we have to put up with. And I said, all right, fair enough.
Well, Richard, not to cut you off, my brother, but that is like the most, people use the cop thing, stop and frisk or being harassed by cops because it's the most visible thing, to use. But I'm talking about like bank loans. Yeah. I'm talking about mortgages. I'm talking about employment, being refused a job. I mean, these are the silent issues that we deal with that don't make the news. They come out in the reports that somehow don't get the exact amount of coverage that they should get. So that's really, when I talk about white privilege, I'm talking about systemic issues. I could care less about some racist white woman in a parking lot, a Walmart parking lot, using the N-word. Like, she has no power. I'm talking about the racist white woman who was the admissions director at a college, or the human resources bigot white woman who won't hire, who just, thinks maybe Shaniqua has a bad attitude just because her name is Shaniqua. Like, that's our real problem.
Institutional, Tim. Here's the $64 million question, and I concede that I had a tough growing up. There was a lot of violence in my home, and I did have it tough. And you're right. You could make the argument that it didn't happen because I was white, and I'm prepared to concede that, and I'm prepared to take that on board. And I am absolutely on board with you when you talk about that institutional stuff. And I love that you say somebody calls you the N-word or is abusive, you couldn't care less, you're just going to ignore it and move on. As ugly as it might be. Here's the question though, and I can't get my head around this, Tim. By the way, folks, at Real Tim Black on Twitter. Pleasure to have Tim on the programme today. I've been following Tim for weeks and weeks. Months even. I should have invited Tim on before now. Here we go, Tim. What can we possibly do about people like that? Now, don't just say education. I want a better answer than that, right? I want a better answer, Tim. What can we do about them? Because on the left, especially on this new social democrat, this kind of Marxist kind of left, they want to send to an island people who've got ugly ideas. They want to ostracise them. They want to send them to Coventry. They want to get rid of them, Tim. And I think no matter how foolish and how ridiculous people's ideas are, you can't do that. We can't just obliterate from our lives those with wrong and foolish ideas. We can't do that. However, we also can't tolerate a situation where black folks in the United States have to put up with that. I can't get a mortgage, or I'm less likely to get one because of the colour of my skin. So what do you do about the white woman who doesn't like the look or the sound of Shaniqua's name? What do you do, Tim?
Wow, we got it. We have to get rid of her. Somehow we have to take her out of power. We would like to say education, but let's keep it real. A person has to unlearn what they've learned. That could take too long. We can't allow you to be in positions of authority where you control the outcomes of people's lives based on your bigoted predispositions. So we have to address it. I would love to say, brother, that we could just all join arm in arm and kumbaya, but I think that there's a certain amount of, we're in a new age. If you're going to be a bigot, you're going to be outwardly a bigot, and someone's got a smartphone, they're going to use that smartphone. Like, there's got to be, I think we should. Like, I'm not one of those people saying, no, you shouldn't expose these people. You should expose them, but they should also be given a way back to redeem themselves. You can't throw them away for the rest of their lives. No. That type of thing is going too far.
Yeah, because people often have ideas that were kind of instilled in them by elders or by authority figures, and children are very impressionable. And if you tell a child enough times as they're growing up that, well, the coloured folks, they're not as intelligent as us. Well, the coloured folks, a child's going to believe that. And there's no doubt. One of the things I'd like to see is transparency. You see, you've got me thinking, if African Americans are getting refused for mortgages when they shouldn't be, I'd like to see transparency. I would like to see financial institutions compelled every now and then to open their books. Let's go through a list of those you turned down for a loan. Why did you turn down Mr. and Mrs. Smith there? African Americans. Doesn't look like there was any good reason to turn them down. I'd like to see that, Tim. I don't know how, logistically, if that's a possible thing to do, but I'd like to see that. Well, you had no good reason to turn them down, so why did you turn them down?
Right. Or why did you give them a higher interest rate than a white couple that had the exact same level of credit? So these types of things happen. I would say, lastly, maybe we have a dialogue. Like if a person's genuinely just doesn't get it, I'm down for having a conversation. I'm down for us expressing ideas. I mean, let's have a conversation. Let the best ideas win. At the end of the day, I think bigots and racists, they don't want light to be shining on their bigotry. So let's have a conversation in front of the world and let the world make the decision. I believe in the better. I think people are better than we give them credit for. Most people are good people, and if we expose the problems, good people will stand up. That's what I believe.
No doubt
I gotta
about
believe.
It. Yeah, me too, Tim. Me too. I want to just mention your YouTube channel again. Folks, you really should check out Tim's videos and his radio show. Go to youtube.com and just look for Tim Black. There's only Tim. The Tim Black at Night show and his No Sellouts stream, which is at 9 p.m. Eastern time, Monday to Friday, which is about 2 a.m. UK time, but they're always uploaded. I stay up late, Tim, but not that late. But they're always uploaded to YouTube. I'm an old man. I go to bed early, but they're terrific shows. I'm not just saying that. And you can follow Tim on Twitter. It's at Real Tim Black. A real breath of fresh air, Tim, having you on. I'll give you the final word, and I'm going to give you an open door invitation anytime you want to come back. Whenever there's something to say, get on the program and come back. Love to have you on again.
Amen. Well, thank you, Richie, for sharing me with the audience. Thank you for the interesting conversation. We kept it real. That's all I ask, is that we just be open and be willing to have the conversation, my brother. I appreciate it. Everyone out there, come check me out. I'm independent. I'm not controlled by any political party. I'm going to keep it that way. We're not many, but we're plenty. And I think that what we have now is an opportunity to make a better world if we all get involved. So thank you once again, Richie. I appreciate it.
Amen, Tim. Thanks for your time today. I can't wait to do it again. The brilliant Tim Black live on the line from DC today at Real Tim Black on Twitter. That's right, at Real Tim Black on Twitter. And if you go to youtube.com and you put Tim Black or Tim Black TV, you'll find Tim. There's only one Tim Black on YouTube there. Great stuff, that. Great stuff. Right, going to take a very quick break. When we come back, comments from you on Twitter, and Mickey Summers joins the program in about 10 minutes time. You do not want to miss Mickey. He's been at the independent inquiry into child sex abuse hearings in Nottingham today and yesterday. Mickey is a survivor. He campaigns for survivors, and he's been working for years to expose those who covered up child sex abuse in Nottingham children's homes. You don't want to miss that, coming up in a few minutes' time. This is Tuesday's Richie Allen Show, back in 2.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
Welcome back is right. Loads of tweets on Tim. Follow Tim on Twitter at Real Tim Black. Delroy, who's been listening to the program, sent me a lovely sketch the other day, by the way. Thanks, Delroy. I've got that on my screensaver on my computer now. Delroy says, Richie, I've been stopped and frisked many times and I am pretty much a law-abiding citizen, 54 years old. And yeah, as a black person going for job interviews in my early 20s, it was just a nightmare, a blatant nightmare, and I have A-levels, says Delroy. And I don't doubt any of this. I don't for a minute. At Raven Coffee EU. How you doing, Raven Coffee? Good on you, Richie, for bringing on Tim Black. Listened and followed Tim when I was in the USA. He is the real thing. Thanks for introducing him to your audience, says at Raven Coffee EU. Thanks very much, Raven. I enjoyed listening to Tim. Came across Tim weeks and weeks and weeks ago on Twitter. He followed me, I think, or maybe somebody connected with my Twitter account followed him. There was a follow back, and I began listening to him. And I like him a lot. And I said, well, let's get him on. Very, very interesting man, no doubt about that. Hi to Mwinga, who says, yes, COINTELPRO was a big thing. I still think that it exists, even in this day, in a new, updated, systematic way. There's no doubt in my mind. Again, you can't point to any specific examples and say something for a fact. I can't say for a fact that the intelligence agencies trained and hired goons into communities to start burning cars when people come together on the streets to protest the murder of a young black man or a woman by a police officer. But I'm absolutely convinced it goes on. It's exactly what you would do. You don't even have to be evil or sick to think of it. What would you do to put down all those people? So you got all these people coming out, nice people, family people, neighbours coming out. We've had enough. We've had enough of. It's bad enough an unarmed man gets shot by the police for nothing. It's twice as bad that nothing ever happens in many cases to the police officer who did it. So if you say to me, what would you do to break that up? Well, send a couple of goons in, burn a few cars. Why not? Smash a few windows. Now, Tim was very specific in saying, hang on a second. In a lot of these communities, you've got people with absolutely nothing. He didn't, for a minute, endorse it. He didn't endorse it, but he said some of them will take things from shops. We're seeing it in Indonesia, aren't we? I heard on the news today that the military in Indonesia are firing shots into the air because people are looting the shops. Maybe when people are at their absolute wits' end, maybe they will turn to crime. I don't know, regardless of what they look like or what their ethnicity is. Really interesting stuff. Hi to Mark Saunders as well. Loads of tweets on this. Hi to Diane in Ireland. Tim's a really good speaker, Richie. He gets straight to the point there. Absolutely. Top guy is Tim. 5.5 minutes past the hour. So we've not talked about this for quite a while on the show, but I want to get into the independent inquiry into child sex abuse. And Mickey Summers was on this programme around about 2.5 years ago. It was brilliant. It's not anymore. It's not available anymore on YouTube because the YouTube channel was deleted back in February, and I do have the interview somewhere, so I must upload it again. But it is on Podomatic, the original conversation where Mickey told me his story. What happened to him went way back to when he was in a children's home, the terrible things that happened to him and his own journey. Amazingly candid and very humble guy is Mickey. Now, the independent inquiry into child sex abuse is in Nottingham at the moment and will be there for the next couple of weeks, and they are interviewing victims. Now, when you think Nottingham, you think Melanie Shaw, right? Who was on this programme a couple of years ago, twice, talked about her own experiences, and she's been in prison since then, so it's more like 2.5, nearly 3 years ago since she was on. And there's a lot of concern about why she's in prison and how long she's been kept in there. And there are those who believe that she's in isolation there. And her supporters and the people that look out for her can't seem to get answers. And there are people who believe that Melanie is there exclusively for the reason that she is prepared to name names. Now, I don't know anything about that, and I couldn't endorse that at all. But that's what people believe. Anna Braga, an old friend of mine, very good journalist, has followed Melanie's case and is a good resource if you want to find out more about what's happening with Melanie Shaw. I will, of course, ask Mickey for his take on Melanie's story and where she might be. But I want to hear about what's been going on at these hearings yesterday and today. We'll hear from Mickey in a couple of minutes. As usual, if you've got something to say while Mickey is on, it's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. At Richie Allen Show on Twitter. Send me a direct tweet. And if I can ask you a question to Mickey, I will ask the question to him. Right, okay. Music from Gary Barlow. I know. I'll listen to anything. Music from Gary Barlow and Let Me Go on the Richie Allen Show. It's 11 minutes past the hour. Let's move on. And I'm looking forward to speaking with my next guest. It's been ages and ages since he was on the programme. As I said, if you go to podomatic.com, iTunes, my conversation with him from a couple of years ago will be there. Now, before we say hello to him, you will know by now that the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse is spending 3 weeks examining the extent of abuse in Nottinghamshire's care system dating back to the 1950s. This, of course, is the massive inquiry which has had several chairwomen, I suppose you could say. Professor Alexis J is the current chair of this inquiry. It's in Nottingham, and we've heard a lot about Nottingham in the last few years. Let me welcome back to the programme a man who's a survivor himself. He's a campaigner, he's an activist, and he manages the Nottinghamshire Child Sex Abuse Survivors Group. Great to welcome back to the programme, Mickey Summers. Mickey, thanks so much for coming back on. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thanks for having me on. You've been there for the last couple of days. Mickey, what's been happening? How is it being worked? Are people getting to stand up and have their say? Are they being listened to? Talk to me a little bit about how this is actually working in practice.
A lot of people had reservations early days about what could be and what couldn't be. My big issue is that really this should have been on the lines of an inquest, not an inquiry, but it's all we've got. It's the only ship in the ocean. But from the start yesterday morning when the counsel to the inquiry, Patrick Sadd, started his dialogue explaining everything, it's a dot on the cards now that anything and everything, God willing, will be exposed. The counsel to the survivors in their opening speeches nailed down everything that had already been said by Patrick Sadd. And today, the elected chair of our action group, which is now actually a support group, David Hollis, he really slam dunked the whole system. And today we had testimony from all of some of the survivors from Beechwood.
Will you get to speak yourself, Mickey? Will you get a chance to stand up and talk about what happened to you, do you think?
I can't comment because I've got restraints as to what I can and can't say prior to evidence being given. And that is a legal ruling. I don't have a problem with that because what I don't want and what survivors don't want is to give those perpetrators an opportunity to say that X has said this and X has said that. We've heard enough of their bull over the last few years, accounts of this and that with several people. And at the end of the day, 4 years ago, I told the city council when I shut the city council meeting, their CEO is a liar, and I've come to challenge him. I've been unorthodox in the way that I've done things. I'm not ashamed of what I've done. I've been taken to hell and back with some of their responses, and hopefully at some point in this inquiry, some of this will get exposed.
I can understand. It's funny when you say you've been unorthodox. Everybody's seen the videos of you, and listen, I'm just going to be honest. I can't imagine what you went through, but hearing what you went through when you spoke to me a couple of years ago, I wouldn't blame you for a minute for going about it the way you did, because I suppose you and others were at your wits' end because nothing was happening. Now, let me ask you this. Nottinghamshire Council put out an apology of sorts several weeks ago. How was that received, Mickey, among survivors of sex abuse there?
Are you talking about the apology from the county, which was made 2 years ago and then reiterated this year?
Is that what it was? Right, okay. Yeah.
Or are you talking about the city?
The city. It was the city, wasn't it, about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
Well, it's already been in the public domain, so you people can reference East Midlands Today when Jeremy Ball interviewed me, and Phil Brewster from ITV Central News actually did some video interviews that were broadcast. We weren't happy because we found out that it had been put in sneaked in on their website, and people had to search to find it. We're not happy, and this is the actions. And if you'd heard their statement today that there'll be no apology until there's concrete proof that they've been guilty. Now, what they did in that apology that was put out in the Nottingham Post was they said, which is quite right, that they took over from the county council who ran the social services from 1974 to 1998. That is correct information. What they failed to put in was that they had previously been known as the Nottingham City Corporation. Now, they believe that changing the name exonerates them from anything. The Nottingham City Corporation ran the show prior to the county council running it in the years of 74 to 98. What they want to do is try and minimise it. This is about corporate reputation, corporate image, and basically, it's been explained that, and it's been suggested by a few of the council to the survivors, that there's been collusion along the way. Well, this is something that me and you discussed a couple of years ago. My beliefs and that of others is it's still happening today. It's not going to stop unless we get to the bottom of the whole thing in Nottingham. The
abuse is still happening today. Let me just remind our listeners who's on with me. Mickey Summers is live on the line. Mickey is a survivor and he's a campaigner and he represents other survivors. He's been at the IICSA hearings in Nottingham today and yesterday, and presumably Mickey will be there for the next 3 weeks. It's going on, you believe. Can you give our listeners, Mickey, an idea of the scale of this going from the late 40s, the 50s right up today? What sort of scale are we talking about? Potentially, how many victims are we talking about here in Nottingham?
But according to the statistics, there's well in excess of 350 that came forward. According to Rob Griffin of Nottinghamshire Police, who's the current head of Equinox, he revealed figures that there's 600 plus perpetrators, many of them council workers.
Many of them working for the council.
Yeah.
Hence the cover-up. Here's a question that I've been asked to put to you, but I would have put it to you anyway. You speak to survivors, not just of abuse in Nottinghamshire care homes, but also survivors all over the country. This inquiry, Mickey, for journalists looking at it kind of with objectivity, you try to be objective, even though it's disgusting and horrifying. You look at it and you think, well, you had Fiona Wolf and you had Butler Sloss, and it's been a mess, this inquiry. Do survivors, do you think, did they have genuine faith that this will be properly run and that it will be truly independent and that they are really trying to find out what went wrong right across the country and who's responsible? Is it genuine?
I'm going to speak from my perspective, and this is my opinion. It's not the opinion of any survivors. I'd like to know the reasons why Lowell Goddard left.
Lowell Goddard, yeah.
And I actually believe that those reasons should be made public. As for Alexis J, I've got a few reservations about the inquiry, and they will remain personal until after the inquiry, because I intend to see right through to the end, like whether any of my reservations are in fact real reservations. But as far as Alexis J is concerned, she did a number on Rotherham, and to that end, I have faith that she may well just deliver. My big concern around Rotherham was that she had the people that were the orchestrators and those involved in covering it up. She had them removed from offices and commissioners put in place until they had elections. But after these elections, guess what? A lot of the very same people who have been involved are back in power again.
Yeah.
You know, it's the merry-go-round. And as the inquiry goes on, you'll see that people get removed from a post, they get a golden handshake and move on. But I'm not going to kind of prejudge the inquiry. One of my biggest, I don't know, bugbears really that I have to carry with me is like, I want to do the inquiry myself.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I've got my personal emotional attachment to stuff.
People don't think that, Mickey. Do you know, it's very interesting you saying that. That wouldn't occur to most people, that the survivors themselves, it must be frustrating to hear about somebody being interviewed or to watch somebody being interviewed, and you'd be absolutely tearing your hair out. You'd want to be asking the questions, and it must be a very frustrating thing to watch from a distance. I hadn't really considered that before.
It's been frustrating, but you know what? I'm going to kind of aim towards wrapping this up in what I'm about to say. People might kind of say, well, Mickey Summers has done this and Mickey Summers has done that. Yes, I was the initial one that put my head above the parapet, but Nottingham would not have happened without a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, David Hollis. That man took things to the Crime Commissioner, who took things to the then Chief Constable and the leaders of both councils, who promised us a public inquiry. And if people want to go and look on YouTube, they can see the video where I asked Paddy Tipping, did you get us a public inquiry? And he said, look, it's signed off there. But when David went to go and talk terms of reference, they'd already started. But that's the Dirty Tricks campaign. But David went over and above. He went direct to the IICSA inquiry, got Nottingham accepted, but then over and above that, the hard work and dedication that man put in. And remember, folks, that man has worked on this 7 days a week, 14, 15 hours a day. And what that man doesn't know about what's gone on in Nottingham doesn't even bear talking about. Legal representatives have been blown away by his knowledge of what is. And people can say thank you for me for putting my head above the parapet. But from my perspective, if anyone wants any thanks and recognition, that recognition needs to go to retired Lieutenant Colonel David Hollis.
Brilliant of you to say that, Mickey. And of course, one of the things I got from listening to you a couple of years ago was that it's not about any personal glory for anybody. It's about getting to the truth and, you know, exposing those who covered it up, but most importantly, making sure it doesn't happen again. I want to pick you up on a couple of things. Again, you don't have to answer any of this, and I am mindful of the fact that you're there, and, you know, I don't know whether you're going to give evidence or not, so I appreciate you can't answer all the questions I'm putting to you. But you did mention Lowell Goddard. We had, obviously, Fiona Wolf, and we had Elizabeth Butler Sloss. That should have seen the end of Theresa May's political career, of course, as Home Secretary, because she picked two people knowing that they had connections to people who were accused of child abuse, namely Leon Britton and others. And then we had Lowell Goddard, and she just gave up and went off back to New Zealand. And you're not entirely thrilled about that. And one or two other people have suggested to me that they felt that Goddard was uncovering information or was seeing things that she wasn't comfortable with in terms of where this leads, you know, the chain of command, the people covering this up, and maybe that was why she didn't have the stomach for it. Now, I don't know whether that's just silly opinion or whether there's actually, you know, some evidence to support that. What do you think about Lowell Goddard? Why she might have gone back?
I actually got the impression that she wanted to do a job, but she had the handcuffs on behind the back, and was being railroaded in a direction she was not prepared to go down. That they are my views and my opinions, not the views of anyone else.
No, that's fair enough, Mickey. Mickey Summers is our guest. You'll understand I've been asked to put to you. Does anybody have any idea, Mickey, what's become of Melanie Shaw? What's happening with Melanie?
I can't comment on Melanie Shaw because as far as I know, she's had her evidence taken to the inquiry, and I'm not allowed to comment on any evidence that a survivor may have put in.
No, I appreciate that 100%. I wouldn't expect you to. But she's been in prison for the best part of 3 years now, maybe a little bit longer. And the problem with the internet and the problem with the independent media is people make statements, and often they're just making statements about things they know nothing about. I've not been able to find out why Melanie is still in prison and what, if there's a release date pending or any of that. I just haven't been able to determine that. Do you know anything about why she's in prison at the moment, or have you been in touch with anybody who knows Melanie? And I'm talking about family or friends now, not so-called journalists. Do we know anything about her being in prison, Mickey?
The last I heard, she was in prison for breaching an order.
Which is what I heard.
And basically, all the stories that she was in a secret court, I'm going to state factually that I was present when she got sentenced for doing that. It was not a secret court, and I can't comment on the people.
Good.
That
you don't have to say it, Mickey. I'm going to say it. There's a gang of pretend journalists hanging out on the South Coast who just make stuff up as they go along. Pathological lawyers.
His name sounds something like Ghoulish.
That's the guy. And 3-4 years ago, I did mention to the lady involved not to be taking advice from people who know nothing about the law. And to consult a solicitor when it comes to, looking after your case and all of that. You were saying then, finally, we'll leave Melanie, and God love Melanie Shaw, because I believe what she told me on the radio 3 years ago. I believe that she went through what she said she went through. She wasn't tried in any secret court, Mickey. She wasn't. It was in public. She had a hearing. She allegedly did something. It went against her, and she was sent to prison. That's as far as you understand it.
That is everything that I understand.
And it's everything I understand. It doesn't mean that, I agree with survivors being treated like that. But if Melanie did something, and I remember...
The bottom line is, I'll quote, I can't quote verbatim, but I'll quote the words of David Hollis. Melanie Shaw is a survivor. And as a survivor, her testimony needs to be into this inquiry.
Absolutely.
It needs to be heard, and to that end, Mr. Hollis has ensured that has been done, and I can't comment on that any further.
Good. And my final word on this is I had private telephone conversations with Melanie several times leading up to 2 interviews and afterwards, and I had a lot of time for Melanie, but Melanie hasn't always been a good girl.
No.
Okay? Now, that doesn't excuse what happened to her. And horrendous things happened to her and to Mickey. But Melanie's gotten herself into trouble with the law before, and I know this. And that's why I mentioned these goons on the South Coast who play at being journalists, lawyers. Yeah. And I'm going to say no more about them, because all I'm doing is giving them publicity. I'll say no more about them. It's interesting, Mickey, the next 3 weeks now. So survivors of Beechwood have been given their testimony today. I can only imagine it's incredibly powerful, Mickey.
There was at one point where I had to walk out. Listen, I'm quite a strong person, and someone who's another survivor who's been with me throughout, we're both strong people, and we had to walk out in disgust at some of what we'd heard. I thought it was just a little bit bigger than what I'd gone through when I first came into this.
Yeah.
As it evolved, it evolved into a bigger picture that David Hollis took to IICSA. As it's unfolding now at the inquiry, Joe, it beggars belief that everything that was exposed by counsel to the inquiry yesterday of how many times and opportunities that they've had to do something positive, right? They've never done it. Someone's been found to have done something. They've had an internal inquiry. They've been sacked and then reinstated.
That's just, listeners will be listening to this, and they might be expecting me to challenge Mickey on that point and say, well, Mickey, that's not true. But it is sadly true. It's quite incredible, really.
Well, all I can say is, go onto the IICSA website and replay what was put out yesterday. not only by the counsel to the inquiry, but also to the counsel to the court participants, survivors. You know, those are facts that were laid bare, and they were laid bare from accounts that have been drawn from council records.
I have something to say to you now on this, which I'm really interested in your opinion. I covered what happened in Ireland. When I say I covered it now, Mickey, I didn't uncover or expose anything. I was just like every other journalist. We got the information and we interviewed survivors and we interviewed priests and we interviewed everybody and it came out in Ireland. This is my big concern about the UK. While it was eventually revealed in Ireland and it destroyed people's lives, it destroyed people's lives whom were never abused because it destroyed their faith in their church, but it had to come out. It came out that thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of children were destroyed by priests, by Christian brothers, by nuns. Now, that was positive that came out. But to this day, Mickey, the bastards that covered it up, one of them became Pope Pope Benedict, Cardinal Ratzinger, German guy, you remember him, the last Pope, before he absconded from the throne, one of the first popes to do it in centuries. That, I'm not going to swear, that guy was telling bishops in Ireland that if they knew about priests abusing children, they were to move those priests further down the country out of harm's way. This was pre-internet, this was pre-mobile phones and all of that. This is what went on. My concern is that eventually they will serve up a load of people who were guilty of this or guilty of that. And I think in the future, hundreds of millions will be paid out to survivors, which is good. I know you don't want any money, Mickey. I'm well aware of it, but it's a good thing. But you know my big concern, Mickey? That the people at the very top, like the Catholic hierarchy, ultimately I think they'll get away with it. And I'm not trying to depress you. What do you think?
I couldn't agree with you more. But you know, if you were to ask me on what my views are on the police and the councils, both councils, I've got one word that I could really describe them as a criminal cartel. Right, yeah. The council and the police, right, is no different, right, to the mafia and John Gotti, right, and the New York police, right, that got smashed years ago. Right, and the thing is, right, there's a thing called MASH, the multi-agency safeguarding. Well, like the one thing that I want to put before MASH is PI, for PI and MASH, but PI is paedophile information exchange for the multi-agency safeguarding hub.
Yeah.
And yeah, it might be a snipe back, but the realities are maybe you need to look further down the rabbit hole. It kind of staggers me that Harriet Harman and the paedophile information exchange, it's not as if this was 50 or 100 or 200 years ago, which wouldn't excuse it. It's relatively recent history. It's only 25, 30 years ago. I mean, it's right there, you know. I've been asked to ask you about Greville Janner. I'm guessing you're not going to give me any answer there, but Janner is dead, died last year. Strangely enough, he was able to go to the House of Lords and collect his £300 a day while he was supposedly suffering from dementia. And then he died before he could be asked to give evidence. I've been asked to put to you by a couple of listeners, because of your proximity to Leicester, a lot of people are unhappy about the fact that the establishment, in terms of the media, refuses to name Greville Janner, even though it seems bang to rights, dozens and dozens of victims came forward about Janner. What do you know about Janner, Mickey, or is that something you want to just leave? The only thing I can say is that maybe somebody ought to do some research on the chief constable to the last Leicestershire investigation into Janner, who became the chief constable of Nottingham, that Mark Salon and our late friend Guy Taylor we forced out of Nottingham, who is currently in charge of the strategic command post in Cyprus, Chris Eyre.
I don't need to I don't need to say any more, and neither do you there. Final question, Mickey, and do us a favour, when the 3 weeks are up, come back on and give us a kind of a rundown of what's happened over the 3 weeks, if you don't mind. But before you go, what did you make of Mike Veal? Obviously top detective, top police officer at Wiltshire Police, Operation Conifer, I think. He had the courage, despite the attacks that he got from the media, relentless attacks from the media, he had the courage to come out and say that his inquiry believes that there's very, very good evidence that Edward Heath was abusing children and that it was being covered up by the intelligence agencies. I guess, again, that doesn't surprise you. You know, a Prime Minister could be involved in something like that. He was a heroic guy, Mike Veal.
I've heard a lot of police testimony in the last 5 years that they're not prepared to listen to it. They're not prepared to look into it, and they're not prepared to go down the rabbit hole. Except
him, though. You know, amazing that he, despite the national press was saying that he was an idiot, that he was on a witch hunt, he published his report that said that he believes the witnesses who claimed to be abused by Edward Heath, the Prime Minister, were telling the truth. I thought it was remarkable. It showed great courage by him. What you're saying is, it sounds like he's a bit of a lone angel, that in general police officers just don't want to know.
I'll kind of put it in this context, right? When we was out having rallies and protests in Nottingham, your general policeman, right, they totally applauded everything that we were doing. They're powerless to do anything because of people above them, you know, and there'll be things come out about policemen that have been removed from this investigation, right, to the direction of the criminal cartel.
Soul destroying that for, it must be soul destroying, it must have been soul destroying for policemen and women on the trail of paedophiles, but then they get a tap on the shoulder from a superior who says, listen, forget about that, go and mind the traffic. Because I've heard, I've had Maggie Oliver on this programme who said that the Home Office and top police officers in the country were telling people not to investigate grooming gangs. I mean, it's incredible, Mickey. It's all there.
Well, the only thing I can say about the police not going for these grooming gangs, and I'll bring it back to the inquiry. Alexis J did a little number on the grooming gangs in Rotherham. The inquiry has already been to Rochdale and made some findings. It is about failures, and until we get down to the real nitty-gritty of what was and what is, what we want to know is what will be, and that's the end of it. You know, we need people held to account that have been involved. If me and you go out and commit a crime, and one of your listeners decides to hide us from the police, if we get arrested, they'll go down with us. So my question is, where those these councils or other institutions have been involved in withholding evidence, destroying evidence, they need to be made criminally accountable, and that is something that this inquiry needs to be looking at.
Absolutely, to ensure that in the future, councils and administrators wouldn't dream of burying evidence or hiding evidence. Mickey, thanks for coming back on today. When the inquiry leaves Nottingham in 3 weeks' time, be nice to get you back on the Monday after to give us a kind of a roundup of what went on, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine. To be really factual, it's only this week that the inquiry is in Nottingham.
It's not 3 weeks, is that right?
Next week it's in London, then there's a week's break, and then it resumes for another week. Now, all these details are on the IICSA website. Now, anyone who wants to know what's happened during the day, they can go on the IICSA website, and they can actually see the video links of everything. From my understanding, it's broken down into 4 segments, so you can do piece by piece. And it's through some of that I look back and things that I picked up during the day that may be relevant for future, I go back and look at. And people out there, you can go and do that for yourselves. And if you've got any comments, maybe bring them back to Richie and we can discuss them when me and Richie get back together again in a few weeks.
Yeah, sounds brilliant, Mickey. Listen, thanks for doing what you do. I know you're a voice. I know there are other voices as well. You mentioned David, of course. And we will pick it up again in a couple of weeks' time. Appreciate your time today. Thanks for that. And good luck with the rest of the week, Mickey. Thank you.
And as I've always said, have a nice day.
Cheers, mate. You too. Bye for now. Mickey Summers live on the line to us there from Nottinghamshire. Mickey's at the IICSA round of hearings this week in Nottingham. Good to get his perspective. Been a couple of years since he was on with us. We'll get him back on again in a couple of weeks. It's exactly 18 minutes to the top of the hour. Very quick break. Back with more in 90 seconds.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today.
Richie Allen.
Oh, that was loud. It nearly blew the ears off me. Welcome back to the programme. 17 minutes to 7, Tuesday's programme, even October 2nd, 2018. What a hero Mickey Summers is, and men and women like Mickey Summers. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Amazing, really. Nobody can understand the things that were done to them when they were children, unless they went through them. And you notice when you meet them over the years, people like Mickey, they're never bitter. They're never hateful. They're not full of venom and malice. Angry. Yes, of course they're angry. And often you find they're as angry with the people who maybe didn't ever abuse a child or touch a child, but knew about it and did nothing about it. Burned evidence, shredded documents, burned pictures, whatever, as he said. But they're never bitter or twisted or hateful. And they never give up. Maybe there's something in that, in terms of, okay, again, those who covered it up in Ireland and those who covered it up from Rome, ultimately, in this life anyway, haven't yet faced justice. Priests went to prison. The Irish government had to acknowledge its failings to protect children in Ireland, and massive compensation, which of course financial compensation is never going to return people's childhoods to them. Never going to make them whole again after their childhood was destroyed. And they don't want money. Met a bus driver here. I often tell this story. Old Ray. Got on a bus years ago. I lived in Manchester between late 2003 and late 2005, early 2006. And I lived here. And I lived in Thornton Road, terraced housing, Thornton Road, the Fallowfield Triangle in Manchester. Moss Side-ish, you could say. And I was DJing in town, and I was attending Salford University, and the great and wonderful future Mrs. Allen was working for Kellogg's on Talbot Road, opposite the Old Trafford cricket stadium, and life was good. We didn't have much. In fact, we had sod all. But life was good back then. Not saying life isn't good now, but life was good. We were younger. I had hair. I know. And I watched an episode of The Simpsons last night, the one in series 2 about Demoxenil, where Homer gets Demoxenil by defrauding the company's sickness scheme, the health scheme, and he gets Demoxenil and he wakes up with a full head of hair. I was laughing. I used to have hair. So I had hair back in 2005. Oh, it was lovely back then. But anyway, I used to walk to Wilmslow Road, Rusholme, where it goes through Rusholme. And I used to get on a magic bus. We still have magic buses run by Stagecoach. Magic bus is a bit cheaper than the ordinary Stagecoach bus. Back then it was 50 pence. It's £1 now. In fact, it's more than £1. Although I've not taken a bus for... When was the last time I took a bus? For a while anyway. I walk everywhere. Or when the weather's bad I drive. But I generally walk. Worst storyteller ever. I know. I'm getting there. But anyway, I used to get the magic bus. And I got on the bus one day and the guy refused to take me money. He was defrauding his own company. He wasn't. He was a nice guy. And his name was Ray. And he was a dub. And he was an old dub. And he was lovely. And he was a gentleman. And we got talking. So he used to pull in just past Portland. He used to drive up Portland Street. And just before Piccadilly, he wouldn't turn on to Piccadilly. He would take a left at Dawson's Music. And Mancunians will know what I'm talking about. He would take a left at Dawson's Music. And he would park the bus up. And we'd have a chat. And he was lovely. And anyway, I got to know him. And I'd see him off and on. I wouldn't see him all the time because sometimes I'd go and he wouldn't be driving. There's 1,000 buses anyway, passing you. So only once in a blue moon would I see him. One day I met him. And he sat there and he said, Richie, he said, I've come into a bit of money. And I said, go on. Did you win the lottery? Did you win the pools? Did you have a trifecta or something come in? Did you have an accumulator bet come in? How did you make... He said, I got paid out by the Irish government. And then he proceeded to tell me about the abuse that he suffered. And he was abused, sexually abused and violently abused at a Christian Brothers school in Dublin. And he was amongst a lot of people, was Ray, who back in the early 2000s gave testimony to various tribunals in Ireland. And in the end, the Irish government gave him the money. They gave him hundreds of thousands. I think he got €300,000 plus at the time it was. But what was remarkable was, and I believed him, I believed every word of it, he said he didn't give a shit about the money. And that the money was given to his children so that they could buy their houses. Or at least 3/4 buy their houses. Houses were so bloody expensive. And he had 2 children anyway, and he gave them the money. Like any parent would do, I suppose. But he said the most important thing for me was the Irish government acknowledging that they failed to stop this from happening to children back then, because back then the church was in the pyramid of things in Ireland. The church was on the top. Governments weren't running the country, not that they ever did, ever. But you know what I'm getting at. The church was untouchable, is what it was. And he said it was good on the one hand that the Irish government said, yes, we didn't protect you. But he said, on the other hand, I know that the criminal hierarchy of the Catholic Church have gotten away with it and will get away with it. And he said, that's hard for me to take and it's hard for me to accept in this day and age. But the money never interested him. And I think that's what's going to happen in this country. I think this inquiry led by Alexis J is going to say that there were grievous failings over 5-6 decades to protect children in children's homes, whether it be in Nottingham, whether it be in Manchester, whether it be in London, whether it be on the Isle of Wight, on Jersey, wherever. They're going to say, yes, it happened. And children weren't protected. And we're going to put into place practices in the future and all of that. And they're going to pay out hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money will be paid out to compensate those who weren't protected. But those really responsible for it will never be held to account. And that's just my opinion. It's depressing. It's a depressing thing to say, but it's what I've seen in Ireland. Richard Angelis tweets, Richie, let's not forget that the high-profile person who put paedophilia in the public domain and took the risks with great courage was David Icke. That's right. Edward Heath was alive when David Icke wrote in his books about the crimes of Edward Heath and others while he was alive, and challenged Heath to sue him for libel if he felt those claims were inaccurate. That's absolutely right. I don't ever miss an opportunity to mention that, and I have done many times over the years. And the truth shall set you free. Look for those books, Children of the Matrix. Look at those books where those people are named. People were coming to David Icke in the early 1990s when he'd had his experiences with changing his career from television and going through what he went through. People were coming to him and telling him, yes, naming names. Morrison, some of Thatcher's closest confidants, were abusing children. Cyril Smith, Greville Janner, filthy, disgusting paedophile. And the Daily Mail gave a column several months ago to Janner's son, where he was allowed to claim that the stories about his father were lies. They weren't lies. I might have a tiny bit of sympathy for Greville Janner's children. God love them. They never abused anybody. And it must be very difficult. It must be terribly difficult for them to learn that their father was a filthy fucking child molester. Because that's what he was. There's no doubt about it. It's not conjecture. It's a fact. Dozens and dozens of boys at homes around the Midlands, East Midlands area, Leicester, Greville Janner. These people got away with it. Leon Britton, paedophile, Home Secretary, the guy who lost the dossier, the Dickens dossier. How do you lose that? How do you lose a dossier, carefully compiled, brilliant investigative work that says all of these politicians are filthy fucking paedophiles, and Leon Britton just magically loses it? So these people at the very top, and Mickey Summer said it's going on today. Of course it is. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt that children are being abused by privileged people, people that are above the law in this country. But you won't hear Tommy fucking Robinson ever talking about that. Tommy, I'm a Zionist. Look at me standing on a tank in Tel Aviv. Asshole. Tommy Robinson. Talking about that. He'll talk about grooming gangs, of which, you know, people like Maggie Oliver and others who've come on this programme were exposing for years, and they finally got it into the public domain. And I'm happy to talk about it, to talk about the tendency of some young Pakistani men to think it's okay to go and rape white girls because of their warped religious beliefs. I'm happy to talk about that. But some of these guys, these alt-right guys, they won't talk about about the endemic institutional paedophilia in this country by establishment figures. They don't want to talk about that. Because it's all about money. I did a video today talking about the Truther Industrial Complex. Look at it. Watch it. That's what we have. Aggressively telling people what they want to hear. And charging them for it. That's what you have with these guys. Anyway, I've said enough for today. Do you know what? I've got Deborah Tavares on the programme tomorrow. A lot of people are excited about that, and me included. I'm looking forward to speaking with Deborah. I swapped a few emails with her. I don't know her. She comes across to me as a lovely woman. I've listened to one or two bits and pieces. She's done a lot of interviews. She's spoken publicly a lot over the years, but I'm trying not to listen to too much because I don't want to know too much about her before I meet her tomorrow. And we're going to talk. We've a lot to get through tomorrow. So she's the only guest on tomorrow's programme. Pippa King is back on the programme this week. And who else is on the programme? Oh, the wonderful Maria Heller. Who else is back on the programme this week as well? Irish presidential candidate Gemma O'Doherty will definitely, I think, be on the programme very early next week as well. That's next Monday. Lots going on the Richie Allen Show. Nice to have your company, as always. Thanks for listening to it, and thanks for sharing it when you come across it. When you come across it on the on the YouTube and on the Podomatic and Spotify and all of that. Do share the programme, folks. Let other people know that the programme exists. It does mean a lot to me. So it does. Right. So until tomorrow then, at 5 p.m. UK time as usual. Massive shout out to Tim Black. You loved hearing from Tim. So did I. Great to have him on the programme. Lovely man. Very smart. Let's get him back on again. And thanks to Mickey Summers for sharing his insights into the opening days of the IICSA hearings in Nottingham. We'll have Mickey back on again in a couple of weeks' time. Look after yourselves and one another, leaving you with the old Bee Gees. Love this. Sure, it's only brilliant, this song. See you tomorrow then. Bye now. See you tomorrow.